Thanks very much for joining us. Let's talk about this Iran nuclear deal. You've been very critical of it, very opposed to it. Would it be a game changer as far as you're concerned that if, as a gesture of goodwill to the U.S., the Iranians went ahead and released those 4 Americans they're holding hostages?
Wolf, they should have done that before the United States ever sat down at that table. That should have been a precondition. And the other 2 preconditions should have been that Iran agrees that Israel has a right to exist, and the third precondition should have been that they end the rhetoric of death to America. And if those 3 conditions were not met, we never should have sat down and even started this conversation, much less ended up with this 159-page agreement, which I've read, and it's alarming. And it obviously has everyone in that neighborhood alarmed, from the Saudis to the Egyptians to the Jordanians, and of course, most certainly, the Israelis. But I'm one American who is outraged that this president is so intent on making a deal with people who haven't kept a deal in 36 years since the Ayatollahs took power.
If you do become president of the United States, and let's say this deal gets through, that there's not a 2/3 majority to override a presidential veto in the House and the Senate, what would you do on day one as far as Iran and this nuclear agreement is concerned? In other words, what would be your alternative?
The alternative is to take the actions to revoke the agreement, reinstitute the sanctions on Iran, make it clear that this was a terrible deal. It was done in a manner that didn't really have the support of the American people, was not done in the best interest of peace, and that we have a new sheriff in town. And the new sheriff is not going to accept that agreement as one that we're going to live with, because we can't live with Iran having nuclear power, and we can't live with them continuing to sponsor terrorism through Hamas and Hezbollah, kidnap Americans, kill Americans. It's an unacceptable form of civilized behavior, and we simply aren't going to negotiate.
But what if the Iranians do honor all of its nuclear-related commitments over the next year and a half?
What if there are unicorns that are discovered somewhere in the Middle East? Show me when the Iranians have ever kept an agreement. They haven't. Show me when the Iranians quit chanting death to America. They haven't. Tell me when the Iranians stopped sponsoring terrorism and murder people through Hezbollah and through Hamas. They haven't. So there are a lot of ifs there. But the one thing we know for certain is that this deal is predicated on the absolute ironclad belief that the Iranians can be trusted. Now, somebody else may trust them. I most certainly do not. And obviously, neither do the Saudi Arabian government officials, neither do the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Kuwaitis, the Emirates, and I think anybody who's ever watched them.
Well, and you may be right on the others. The Jordanians did vote in the UN Security Council yesterday, unanimous 15-0 vote in favor of the Iran nuclear agreement. What Secretary of State Kerry says is over the last year and a half, 2 years, the Iranians have kept their word as far as the commitments they made as part of the interim agreement. They say they haven't violated those commitments.
Well, they also, though, put money toward Hamas when Hamas was launching rockets toward Israel last year. I was in Israel at the end of that conflict. I've been going to the Middle East since 1973. My first trip there was 42 years ago, and I've been through virtually every country in that region. And the one thing that I'm absolutely convinced of is that if you really want to mess up the Middle East, just let the Iranians continue to move toward having nuclear capacity, take their sanctions away, and give them the kind of $120 to $150 billion assets to start buying up weapons for the Russians. That enriches the Russians, it empowers the Iranians, and it endangers the world. It's a